Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor, and since this is Memorial Day weekend, I was kind of tossing around Remembrance and thinking about the people in my past, not, specifically connected to war, but I'll probably get to that anyhow, but just the idea of remembering, memorializing the people that I've lost and the people that we've collectively lost through our crafting. So thought I would kind of talk a little bit about that, have my usual rainbow project, but I got a couple of things out to sort of as show and tell. So this is something that, sorry about the sun, my mom needle pointed this beautiful cat needlepoint, and she taught me needlework from an early age, and I took to it really, hey Ari, pretty readily. I think, so I was a stamp collector, and that was my father's influence, and I was also a needle crafter, and that was my mom's influence. And she taught me crewel work, she taught me embroidery, she taught me all these different stitches to integrate into different kinds of needlework. She probably taught me crochet. I don't really remember crocheting. I know that I crocheted an Afghan when I was a teenager for my brother, and my mother must have taught me how to do it. But my recollection of that is not great, so I should probably do some more crochet so that I could improve my recollection, because I'm pretty sure that she showed me how to do it. My grandma was a huge crochet and embroidery fanatic too, and also a sewist. So, and she passed away in the 80s. My mom passed away on my birthday in 2001. As crazy as it's been a quarter century. That's just crazy. Here's something else that she stitched. And this is a kind of thread cross stitch. I always think in terms of the degree of work that goes into kind of thread cross stitch, because it's literally twice as much effort as needlepoint, from the standpoint that you have to make an extra stitch instead of just one diagonal stitch. But isn't that nice? And these cats, so it says our kitties, again I apologize for the glare, but the orange cat is representative of our cat Tangerine, that was my sister's cat, and the black cat is representative of my black cat, who was named Woodstock. I also had a black cat named Sebastian, whom I miss a lot. And here's the show and tell. This is a needlepoint that I did. So again, it's just exhibit A of carrying on the tradition of the needle crafting that went on in my family. I completed this, I'm going to say, a decade ago. And it's not a huge project, but it's needle pointed. It's got, if you can probably tell, there's a little bit of embroidery in there in the eyes of the fish. And it was a bit of a milestone. Every time I finish a needlepoint project, it's a milestone. In fact, I have one that I finished and I have not blocked it yet, which is an absolute crime. I need to fix that. Now here, so talking about knitting, this is my blind Barbie, officially approved by the American Foundation for the Blind. And it says down there, I have to refresh my memory. In any case, she is wearing a sweater that my brother stitched together. And, yeah, it says Barbie. That's what it says. There's when the spacing and Braille gets a little bit off, I'm like, wait, what's going on? But that says Barbie. So in any case, yeah, Braille printed on stuff is a little bit funky. In any case, he made the sweater. He made a number of Barbie sweaters. In fact, actually, this sweater is more for his Jean doll, which I think is maybe a 15 or 18 inch doll. But, if we just cuff the sleeves, it fits Barbie. But in any case, I have not only a few sweaters that he knit, but I also have a couple that he never finished, which I should try to finish for him. And I think I actually have the pattern that he made. So I kind of I would like to have an opportunity to follow in his footsteps in doing little tiny projects like this. I'm sure he used size 0 or 1 needles when he was making that. And I have another project that my brother did. I can remember him by, and it hangs proudly in our living room. I remember when I was growing up, it hung in the kitchen, but he did this sampler. So that's quite a large piece, and he embroidered that. Be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. I agree with that. Yes, again, sorry for the sun and shade. My room faces west, and we have a cornfield behind us, so there's a lot of sun that comes in. But yeah, it's really cool that my brother enjoyed this kind of work. He really took to it. He was a tatter. In fact, I ran across a tatter on YouTube yesterday. Unfortunately, he doesn't have too many videos, but he's obviously even more skilled than what my brother was. Of course, my brother was tailor, so that was his main activity that he did as far as a hobby for stitching, or I'm sorry, as far as a profession. Tatting was a hobby, so tailoring was his profession, and that's what he mostly did with his hands. So in any case, I thought I would kind of dig in just a little bit to the idea of knitting and fabric crafting as acts of remembrance, because it can be really powerful. And this is something I've mentioned before, but since it's Memorial Day, it just seemed like, now I feel like I have sunny lipstick. It felt like something that would be worth addressing. Maybe I can adjust the angle here. Or not. There we go. There we go. It made sense to kind of touch on the attachment that crafting helps us to cement, to perpetuate by our crafting. You can also try lowering this a little bit too. I use my music stand for my camera tripod. There you go. So, what I'm doing here with my hands is what my mom did when she was younger, maybe in her 30s, 40s, 50s. And when I was at home with her, and I remember watching her, sit there with something in her lap that she was stitching on. And it's helpful to think about that connection when I'm stitching. And whenever I finish a piece, I can remember how she did the same, and a lot of the pieces that she finished were for me. And I still use them. For example, I have embroidered tablecloths. I still have crocheted Afghans that she did, that my grandma did. In fact, I'm honestly not sure with any given piece. I know some of them, but for some of them, I'm not sure who made what. I'm not sure who made what. It's crazy. But you can almost look at it as kind of a little exchange, like a conversation across time that, sometimes I could almost imagine her in the same space with me, enjoying this activity. Memorial Day is also time to honor service and sacrifice, and it's primarily, obviously, directed towards the service and sacrifice of people who fought, especially in the World Wars. But service and sacrifice is something that is done by many people, probably most people, right? And certainly by mothers. But even, my brother is a gay man who was quite challenged, tested by society's reaction to his identity. There was a lot of sacrifice there. And he did service as well. He was involved in a metropolitan church. He worked on the AIDS Quilt Project. He helped house homeless gay youth. And he served his friends. He sacrificed a lot just for who he was. And that's a theme that's coming out really strongly in the book that I'm finishing up right now, The Spinning Wheel Maker, Book 4, where I have a young man who is in a situation where coming out poses a huge issue for him. So there are ways and ways of serving. Now, as far as Memorial Day is concerned, there are a lot of things that people do to remember specifically the sacrifices of service people. I don't know a whole lot about this, but apparently hand knit poppies are a thing. Of course, there are, things like patriotic blankets. You can do knitted flags, crocheted, sewn flags. Also, things like comfort shawls that can be donated to veterans, military families. My sister is in a military family, and her husband was in the Navy. And I'm sure she's thinking about him at this time because he passed away not quite a year ago. And, he devoted service to this country. So I'm thinking about the flag that, person receives for a loved one who passed away who was in the service. And that's something that's created, something that's made. When we think about people that we've lost, we can associate memories with them, such as patterns. Like when I think about that crochet pattern that I made, and my memory is still kind of vague, but when I crocheted that blanket for my brother, and I think about the crocheted Afghans that I have, that I received from loved ones, just thinking about the pattern. I crocheted a blanket in that same pattern as one of the Afghans that my mom made. And every time I look at that, I kind of associate that pattern, that motif, with her effort, with her sacrifice, with her service as a mother. Same thing with the techniques. So when we use techniques that we learned from the people who came before us, it's a really cool thing. The needle points, for example, I remember discussing with her different ways of handling, should I use the continental stitch or should I use the basket weave stitch, or, how should I fasten the yarn on the back, secure it on the back, and canvases. And when we talk about kind of thread cross stitch, we also have discussions, and the techniques that I know are to a large extent due to what I learned from her, because when I do needlepoint, it's not because I learned it on YouTube, which is something that I have to admit that I did for knitting. I went to YouTube to figure that out, but for needlepoint, I learned it from her. Same thing with, kind of thread cross stitch. I learned it from her. So when my hands are doing those things that she taught me, it's because of that connection, that profound connection that supersedes the fact that she's gone. There are also groups that finish unfinished projects, and I just think that's the most awesome thing in the world. And I have projects that have been left behind by my brother and my mother, which I also have an opportunity to finish. I have not had that chance yet, but I intend to. And I look forward to it because I think it would be really cool. One thing that's really funny, which is sort of related, is that right now I finished a crossword puzzle book, and I was like, well, I have crossword puzzle books that my mom left behind. And literally over the past couple of weeks, I have finished crossword puzzles that she started. And it's kind of similar, it's not the kind of thing that I can look on proudly. And I mean, I could hang it up on the wall, right? But it's sort of like, woo-hoo-hoo, it's like a Twilight Zone moment. It's like, wow, she started this crossword puzzle probably 30 years ago. And here I am in 2026 finishing it. And obviously saving it because I can't throw it away now, But it's similar with finishing something that someone stitched. I mean, it's a really cool connection. There are probably people who are remembering Memorial Day by knitting at cemeteries and, by perpetuating their craft near where their loved one was laid to rest, and also probably at family gatherings and at memorial events, which I think is also a really cool thing. So we can also think in terms of what was passed down in terms of tools. I still have knitting needles that my brother left behind. I have hoops that my mom left behind. Heck, I still have canvas that she left behind. I still have fabric that they both left behind. And I was talking to my daughter a few days ago. I was like, I've got, fabric. I have clothes that my brother made for me when I was, a totally different size from what I am now. And I can't wear them, but I can't throw them away. And she's like, well, give them to me and I'll find some way to use the fabric. And I was like, that's a really cool idea. So I think we're going to look into that. In fact, I have a couple of things that my brother made for my mother. And now I have them, and they're just kind of sitting there. Beautiful wool fabric. He knew what he was doing when he chose fabric. He knew what he was doing when his techniques and stuff, color. But nobody's wearing these items. They're totally out of fashion. But my daughter could, and I could too. But I think really, if she's interested, she should get the nod. She's, let me think now, 20, 25, 24, 25, 25, 25. Yeah. So, the baton is getting passed to you, Dare, of taking these beautiful pieces and figuring out some way to memorialize your uncle and your grandmother by doing something, upcycling them. It's a really cool thing. Tools, materials, pattern books. I have pattern books that I inherited from both of them. I have books about the history of needle crafting, the history of knitting, the history of embroidery, and notes, personalized notes of theirs that are in there, and probably even dating back to my grandmother, which is also, it's just the coolest thing. Traditions, all those traditions that get handed down are just a way of recollecting a person's life as opposed to their death, that they are still there with us. They're still embedded in us, in our genetic makeup, even in our biological bodies. Obviously I have my parents' DNA. I share the DNA with my grandparents, with my siblings, and part of that DNA entails enacting the crafting that they did. And that is, it's as powerful as cooking. It's almost like recipe books and, using recipes that they used back in the day. I still use recipes for pecan pie, pumpkin pie, that I received from my mom and that she received from her mother-in-law, and probably from her mother too. We probably had a little closer relationship with my dad's mom, but she was a little bit, just a hair younger. But in any case, I think crafting and cooking in that regard are kind of similar. So as long as we're on the topic, just maybe a few notes to remind us of maybe some of the history of knitting and crafting during especially World War II. The war effort was dependent not just on soldiers, but also on civilians and the interrelationship between the two. And civilians knit socks, they knit gloves, they knit balaclavas, scarves, sweaters, and they even knit helmet liners for service members, depending on the climate. And this probably, wasn't just here, right? It was, across Europe, especially in the colder fronts. There were wartime knitting campaigns, and they functioned to transform domestic craft skills into organized national service efforts with volunteer knitters who contributed handmade garments that enhanced the warmth, the comfort, and even the morale for troops. Can you imagine? I mean, you're on a front. I've translated some just crazy documents left behind by soldiers in the field, and sometimes there are mentions in there of receiving hand knit socks from family members. And it really meant a lot to those soldiers to have access to those clothing items so that they could, feel tangibly the warmth and comfort extended to them by their family members in a time and circumstance that was arguably not of their choosing and extremely trying. There was also a very high strategic importance of just fabric production, fiber production in general, wool, cotton, flax, textiles of all kinds, for uniforms, blankets, to everything from tents to parachutes, even bandages and rope, countless military necessities. And, even though a lot of that was produced industrially, it's still all connected. It's still the same, taking fiber, producing it, making thread, making fabric, making garments. And there were those home front knitters who regarded what they did as direct contributions to the military success. Doing one's bit, as it were, through the labor of their hands when they couldn't serve or weren't eligible to serve, especially back then for, a lot of women. There were organizations that particularly women formed, churches formed, aid societies formed, community groups formed them, organized knitting circles to make these kinds of contributions and indulge in mutual support and wartime solidarity. And that's something we can also remember at this time. Again, Memorial Day, it doesn't have to just be about soldiers. The war effort was collective, and it was rooted in more than just the acts that happened on the battlefield. There was so much that lay behind that. And I don't really have a whole lot of this. I have some samples, but it'd be interesting to think in terms of like the patterns that people saved. I'd be curious if you guys, like, do you have any patterns? Do you have any project notes maybe that you have inherited or were able to save from back in the day? Sometimes if you do, that can be like a touchstone that links us to the whole concept of Memorial Day. With present day fiber artists who have relatives back in their ancestry who contributed even on the home front. It'd be interesting to know if you guys have anything like that, artifacts. As a stamp collector, I can imagine that there probably are pattern collectors and collectors of fiber memorabilia from those historical periods. It's a really interesting concept, so feel free to share if that's you. So yeah, I think this is just a nice moment. It's an opportunity to sort of associate what we do as living crafters today with the living work of those who preceded us in crafting and in contributing through crafting to just basically making life just a little bit better, a little bit more lovable, a little bit more human in the best sense of the word. And to think in terms of, the kind of conversation that we're sort of enacting and having as crafters today with the people who came before us, recognizing the countless hands whose textile labor sustained soldiers, non-soldiers, protected lives, and supported not just military operations behind the scenes, but everything else too that was being protected and fostered by those operations. So I wish you guys a really good Memorial Day and a thoughtful opportunity to remember those who came before us and those who were in service, regardless of the nature of that service and that sacrifice. So I'm going to go and enjoy the rest of my holiday. We'll talk soon. Ciao.